So Chris Bodell is our lead motion designer in Google Developer Studios. He is responsible for a lot of stuff across all our YouTube channels, not only complete animations, but also every little sort of opener, closer, these screens that we have. If you look at our YouTube channels, on any of our developer channels, you'll see Chris's work, and we're very lucky to have him. So thank you, Chris, for joining us.
Thank you so much. Let's move this gently. Okay. I'm going to do a little bit of switching over to all of my stuff. I am so glad I didn't include any things from my portfolio, because Brian's is very good. And let's just get that all cleaned up. How's everyone doing? Good. It's Thursday. It's not the most exciting day of the week. All right. Great. So, gonna bring up Kent. And we are ready. Great. So, first slide. Hi. I am Christopher. This is me. I work for Google Developer Studio. I am the senior motion designer over there, so I involve myself in all things that are have to do with motion, whether it's video or stuff on our social channels or our events. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of stuff to do all at once. So a little bit about me. If you've seen the invite, you pretty much know everything there is to know about my personal life. It's right there. But I'd like to talk just really quickly about my professional life, because it's ridiculous. So this is my professional resume in ascending order of ridiculousness. As it turns out, the least ridiculous job on my resume is Google, so that's good. I'm on a good track there. I've worked at a couple of college stations, one for a college that I actually attended and one for a college that I did not attend. I worked for one of the startups here in San Jose. It was basically what got me here from Chicago. It was kind of like a After Effects factory farm. We didn't really make a thing or like a piece of software or anything. It was just kind of, we made videos and lots of them. It seems like one of those places where if it were 20 years ago, it would have just been called a medium-sized business instead of a startup. But that's how things go. When I was in Chicago, I worked for a company called Monster Jam, where we produced lots of advertisements and stuff for monster truck rallies, things of that nature. Our parent company was Feld Entertainment, which owned Disney on Ice and the Ringling Brothers Circus. It was weird. There were lots of explosions, lots of fairy dust. We did a lot of like local ads. I'm sure you've seen these like local ads before, Sunday, and all that. So there were a lot of particles, a lot of explosions, a lot of fairy dust, things like that. It was about what you would think working like that at a place like that would be. My direct superior got mad at me once when I told him that wrestling wasn't real. So, it's one of those. I worked at a private investigator's office for about 2 weeks until the check started bouncing and I realized I was never getting paid. So I left. I worked as a video editor. I did like all of their courtroom videos. So, getting people like, getting their crutches out and putting their neck brace on before they come into work, that sort of stuff. Funny story though, I am technically a licensed private investigator though. If you want to work at a private investigation office, no matter what your actual job title is or what you do, you still have to register as a private investigator. So, it takes no certification, no training, nothing like that. You just go into a room, some place that looks like an official office, and you give them $75 and a thumbprint, and you're a licensed private investigator ready to operate in the state of Illinois. So, if you have any need for that, I guess I'm your guy. And then the most ridiculous job I've ever had was a cadaver lab videographer. I worked for a medical association for some years. I was kind of one of the founding members of the video department. And when we were getting all started up, we were thinking we're going to be doing promotional stuff and educational content and that sort of thing for the medical association, until they built a full-blown medical lab in the basement. And they were going to use that for, like med student instructional videos and things like that. And it wasn't until then that we realized that I was the only person on the entire team that could go down there and be cool with it. So I became the sole cadaver lab videographer and video editor as well. So yeah, it's interesting when you come into work and there's a busload of med students and a truck full of parts. And you get to stand in there all day and shoot video about, orbital fractures and spinal injections. And it was weird, man. It was really weird. But, okay, so that's just, quick little thing about me. Hope you enjoyed it. What I want to talk about is what we do here at Google Developer Studio. So we have a few different, I would say, like categories of videos that we make here. So we have promotion, you see in the one corner there, and a lot of the kind of like fully animated promo videos that we make are, to kind of like advertise new features of a product. This one that you see in the corner is for, one of our more recent developer tools called Flutter. We do a lot of documentary stuff. So this one in particular is called Centered. We have, producers going to different parts of the world to interview people about the design of their apps. And it's kind of just a really fascinating series, and we get to do a lot of fun animations with maps and phone apps and all that kind of stuff. And then the other side, we have kind of like our bread and butter, and this is like what really drives people to the channel. The education videos that we do these a series called Dev Bites that we do on various platforms. This one in particular is Android Jetpack. It's usually it's a talking head on a green screen with a backplate, and then we have just kind of slides on the side. And these slides just kind of support everything that they're saying and helps people connect the dots. And generally these videos are like 3 to 4 minutes where they just talk about one particular topic. Don't ask me what any of those particular topics are. I'm not a developer, so we just kind of make them and then pass them over, and hopefully they all make sense. And then we also have a couple of news package shows that we do. And these are kind of more, just talking about the developer news of the week. A lot of times we have a couple different shows that we do. This one is Dev Show, or TLDR. And then we are starting up another one in a little bit that is going to kind of talk about, cloud news, because we have a lot of cloud news. And this is just to inform the community of what's going on before we make any sort of like big grand announcements like in the the promo videos or something. So what I like to do from a production standpoint here is kind of break these up in a few different ways. So I kind of use a little sliding scale here in my mind, from fun to paying the rent. And we have these projects over here on the left. They are, for me, they're very fun to do. They're very involved. There's lots of, there's lots of ways for me to kind of really flex my creativity. And then on the right, we kind of have, a lot of these, these videos, they're important. They get us a lot of views and they, get a lot of praise from the community. But they kind of tend to work on a formula. And after you work on that same formula for a year or 2 years, it starts to become kind of, we're just paying the rent here. So not a whole lot of opportunity to really flex a ton of creative muscle once you get into a groove with that. And then I started splitting these up into into like a quadrant over here. Like what is really, really complex to work on, what is very simple to work on. So in this case, like the promotional video, these things are, completely fully animated based on storyboards. There's a lot going on. It takes me a bit to do these. And then we have the dev bites where, every topic is going to be new. It's going to require its own set of slides and things like that. There's a lot of original content going on there. So like, we kind of have to, always switch gears for every one of these to make sure that, all the graphics are looking good. And then on the other side, we kind of have more of the simple stuff. So a lot of this doc stuff that we do, we're kind of more like developing a brand. But once we kind of do all of that, it's, it's basic, it's lower thirds, it's, screenshots and framing and all that. And then we do, some other fun little things like, map animations, where they're going to for this episode and things like that. And then we have, stuff like our news package, which follows a much more strict formula where it would just, be kind of like a single picture opens up just to kind of show, what they're talking about. So what I want to focus on right here is kind of this quadrant right over here, like somewhere in between simple and paying the rent. What I've really been focusing on over the last year or so is taking a lot of this kind of formulaic stuff that has, that where there are a lot of similar components and a lot of just routine things, and trying to kind of figure out ways that we can automate those things and rig them in a way that makes it like extremely easy for the motion graphics designer, and just as easy for the editor who then has to take these and manipulate them. So what I want to talk about today is rigging in After Effects. So. Has anybody ever like worked with a animation rig, made an animation rig, played with kind of some of the new features in After Effects that pertain to that? So what an animation rig is, for the purposes of what we're showing today, it's a template. What we're going to do is kind of create a motion graphics template that people can take, either a motion graphics designer or a Premiere editor. Can kind of take this template and work with it with relative ease to kind of make some really complex graphics, but not just to make some complex graphics, but to make them unique and make them theirs. So we're going to be working with a couple of things. I'm not going to do like a full-on demo. This isn't like a Andrew Kramer step-by-step kind of thing. I'm kind of going to give like a little bit of a high-level idea of the sorts of tools that we work with to kind of try and minimize the tedious work that we have to do. So one thing I want to talk about is the Essential Graphics panel inside of After Effects. This is a new thing that just recently came out where you're able to take individual properties inside of your timeline and move them into this little panel here. So effectively what it does is it kind of limits the tool set to only the properties that you think people need to manipulate, rather than giving people, you give people like a laundry list like this. A big After Effects file with all of these layers and everything all interconnected, and people are going to look at this and they're going to say, I don't, with no guidance, I have no idea what I'm supposed to manipulate here. So that's why we have something like the Essential Graphics panel, where we can kind of just take all of these properties and just put them in one place, so we can tell the designer then or the editor, hey, just use this. So, and then back to the confusing slide over here. We're also going to work a little bit with expressions. So I'm going to keep this again, super, super high level. I know there's probably a lot of, motion design experts out there right now in the audience, and there's also probably a lot of people who are nowhere near that. So I want to kind of try and, keep things a little balanced over here. But I assure you, it looks like, terrible, scary code. It's kind of not that bad. But basically what expressions are is, the cool thing is with After Effects is there is an entire JavaScript engine sitting underneath. And it lives inside of every keyframeable property. So anywhere where you can add a keyframe inside of After Effects, you can add an expression. And these are kind of like little extras that you can tag on to each individual property. And you can link different properties together. So say you want to only, you have two layers, and when one of them rotates, you want the other one to rotate at the exact same rate. You can add an expression to kind of link those two properties together. So now instead of animating two things, you're only animating one thing, and the other one just moves with it. And then we're going to do some real basic if-then statements. If the user clicks on a thing, then this happens and this happens. And if the user doesn't click on a thing, then this happens. So it's, we trying to kind of put a little bit of that sort of cause and effect relationship into these individual properties here. So one thing, I tend to get in the weeds with this a lot myself. So I kind of made a little bit of a checklist for myself whenever I want to start kind of making an animation rig or automating any sort of properties or something. Move that a little bit. So a few questions that I ask myself is when I'm making a rig like this, when I'm trying to kind of automate different parts of the whole procedure, is this actually saving time? So a lot of times, I end up it's very easy. Once you start getting into this idea of I can, make all these little checkboxes and dials and knobs and all this kind of stuff, and you start linking them all together. Sometimes you kind of get into the weeds a little bit. You kind of have to pull yourself back a little. And this is the thing that I keep asking myself all the time is when I make an animation rig, is this actually saving any time, or am I just making more little knobs and buttons for people to have to go and dig up? So it's an important thing to consider. The other thing is for whom is it actually saving that time? Is it for you? Is it for the editor? And this is really important because oftentimes you can sit there and you can make a rig and pull everything all together and make a nice little essential graphics template that you can throw off to your editor. But in some cases the editor may now have to do more work than you had to previously do, just doing it inside of After Effects. You've effectively just offloaded all of your work and then some to somebody else, And we don't want to do that either. We want to, we want to try and take the accumulated time that everyone has to work on this project and get it down to almost nothing. And kind of back to what I was saying before, would it be easier to just do this manually? I've had a few animation rigs that I've put together where I'll have a few different layers stacked, and I will add something to the opacity property on each one of them, and then add a little, and connect those over to a slider so you can choose how many of those layers you want to actually be visible. And for something like that, I found that I could just also hit the little visibility eyeballs, and that works just as well. So, consider how much time it would actually take for the user to do this sort of thing, versus how much time it would take them to just not use your rig at all and do it themselves. And last, is the process actually clear to the user? So this kind of comes back to all of these things wrapped up together. Consider who you're doing this for. I believe that's kind of the next thing. Who is your user? Is it going to be, an After Effects veteran who's going to be using this inside of After Effects? Is it going to be a Premiere editor who is, who just, they just need a lower third. Like how are we going to structure that so it is as easy as possible for an editor to just grab that, pick it up, and go. My rule of thumb is like, sometimes these things have to get very complicated, just it's, by their nature. If it takes longer than like 2 or 3 minutes for you to explain your template to somebody who doesn't like necessarily know how to use After Effects, you probably need to go back to the drawing board and figure out how to simplify this as much as possible. So the other questions to ask is, what should be rigged? So when I'm looking at my rigs, I try to think, what are all of the properties that I want people to be able to control? So in this case, I would, maybe want to have them change the title, for this lower third, change the name, change the title. Maybe I want the user to like add more lines if they need to. Change the color of the text if necessary, if they happen to be on like a lighter background. These are all things you kind of want to consider, make a little list in your head, or, write it down. Like, what are all the properties that you think the end user is going to want to change? But also, what should not be rigged? And this is kind of important too. Like a lot of what I'm doing is making sure that not only can people can change these things very easily, but they can also stay on brand. They're restricted by certain, by certain properties. So, in this particular case, I would probably want them to stick with either black or white and not hot pink. And we have very strict standards as far as what kind of font is used around here. So we probably don't want them changing that. So we want to be able to empower people to do the things that we want them to do, but also restrict them from getting a little out of control with it. So I'm going to just kind of give like a very high level demo. I'm going to start with this lower third because that's how all great motion design tutorials start, right? With lower thirds. Again, I'm kind of trying to like make this for kind of like the entire audience here. So this is going to be a very high level thing. If you're like an After Effects expert, just follow along and nod your head. But this is kind of more like really what I want to do here is show a little bit about what you can do with an After Effects rig and how, this might actually apply to your own work. Because it's always fun once you know like what can be done with these sorts of like motion graphics templates. It really kind of opens up the doors for like all sorts of automation opportunities. And even if you're not a motion designer, you're a producer, you're an editor, you can kind of take these sorts of ideas and start to think about your own process for your own shows or videos that you work on with other people, and try and think a little bit about how can we start to find these little efficiencies in the process and start to work together to make everything go very quickly. I also want to give a warning. I don't actually know what I'm doing. So, I mean, I've been doing motion design for a really long time, but when it comes to all that scary code over there, a lot of that was just, from me kind of, either generating it from After Effects with various tools that they have, or, copy pasting it from the internet. And over time, I've just kind of like learned how to do it by memory and all that. But I mean, what I'm trying to say is that a lot of the code that you see here is not really that entirely complicated, and really anyone could write. It's very like like JavaScript 100 here. So with that, I'm going to come off to our template over here. And so I have a few examples of lower thirds and a few different ways that we can treat them. One of the things I want to talk about with this particular lower third here, we just have a name and a title, and that's it. Give me 1 second here. So This is, I'm not really going to get too much into like expressions or anything with this one. I wanted to kind of share a neat little script that we've been using recently to kind of do a lot of batch processing. Last year we did the Cloud Next conference. We had, I think, a little over 400 different talks that we had to publish to YouTube in the span of about 3 days. So, and there are at least, there is at least one person speaking at each one of these things, which means we, needed somewhere around the lines of like 600 different lower thirds that we needed to generate for this very quickly. That is not something that I am going to do like 2 days before the show. So one really neat thing that we found digging around, the great thing is we had all of our speaker names and everything inside of a spreadsheet already. So I started thinking, if we can take this spreadsheet, and I just have a little example of a list here. If we can take this spreadsheet here and throw it through a script that can just generate all of this for us, that would save us like a ton of time. So what I did was I had the social team go and gather all of the names and titles of all of these people and throw them in a spreadsheet just like this. So we have a little script. It's an old script. It's something that I dug out of the archives. It was made for the CS3 era. So I don't even know what year we're talking about with that. But it's called CSV to text layers. And effectively what this is doing, if you look over here, does Zoom work today? It does. If you look over here, we have 2 layers, and one of them is called name and one of them is called title. They are called exactly name and title. And the reason why that name is important is we're going to funnel it through this little spreadsheet that we made, where we have name and we have title. And effectively what this script is going to do is it's going to grab everything in that name column. It's going to make a new composition for it. And then it's going to autofill all that stuff. And it's going to take everything in that title, and then it's just going to autofill all of those titles. So I just made this up in numbers really quick, and then I exported it as a CSV file. Obviously the same would work for Google Sheets or whatever you have around. But so I'm going to highlight this over here, and we go into scripts, CSV to text layers, and this is an entirely free script. It's out. If you type that exact phrase, CSV to text layers, one word, you'll get it. And like I said, it's kind of an ancient script. It's been around since forever, but it surprisingly still works, so we still use it. And all it does is just ask you, hey, what CSV do you want to convert to text layers? And you click on that. Pardon me. You click on that. You say open, and what we have now is just a list automatically generated of all the lower thirds that we need. So this was quick. This was like 5 or 6 of them that I could just do on stage very briefly. When you have 400 to 600 of these, this is an absolute godsend to have around. That's my first little tip. So when we did all the graphics for Cloud Next, and we produced all of those lower thirds and got them all out the door, we had this big package of them, sent them over to our editors. And I was there on site in case anything went wrong. And of course, everything went wrong. So one of the things that happened was I kept on, I was just like, I'll be around. I'll field any requests. If you need some additional graphics or something, I'm right back here. I'm just making thumbnails. And then one person came up and they're just like, hey, I got, I have this list of lower thirds. I have this person. I don't have a lower third for this person. I need this lower third. And yeah, sure, no problem. And then my patience got very, quickly whittled down when more and more people started coming up to me asking me if they could have another lower third that wasn't in the list. Turns out the list was kind of wrong. There were a lot of people that were added at the last minute. There were a lot of people that ended up having to get swapped out. So this became a big problem where I was I was doing more like custom lower thirds for people than I was, all the other stuff that I was supposed to fix. So I had to think really quick about how I was going to figure this out. And one of the things I did is going to bring us to our first little expression is this. It's called thiscomp.name. And what I'm doing with this effectively is I'm going to go ahead and turn off this expression really quick. Sorry, just to kind of give you an idea of what's going on. So I'm going to go in here and, change this to the first name that came to my head was Spider-Man. And he is both spider and man. Yes. So let's say this was our template that we had. This was just kind of like the default text that we had. What I did here was I have this expression. You see when I turn this on, it changes it back to what it was. And the reason why it did that was because I used an expression called thiscomp.name. And what that effectively says is go into the name of this composition. And we can see right over here. Go into the name of this composition. Take what is in the name of that composition and use it for the text. So now you see I can go into here and say I wanted to, change this really quick to, something else. And it would just automatically change the name based on the name of the composition. So you're thinking, why can't I just go ahead and click in here and change it myself, and then we're all good? The reason why is because I needed to rapidly make a lot of these very quickly. People, I just started saying just write a Post-it note, put it on my computer, and then I'll get to it. And then I started just getting Post-it note after Post-it note just stacked up on my computer. So now what I can do is I can just sit there, I can grab all of these, I can count, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different lower thirds I need to make right now, and I can just go and duplicate, come in here, change, just really quickly hit return and, change this to whatever I want. And now every one of these has been changed to just the title of the composition. So it's really great to just kind of rapidly go in there and just knock all of these out without having to even open up the composition or go into here and play with this at all. So that really kind of saved my butt for that show. One thing I do want to talk about here is it's not just this comp.name. There's also this other little thing here called split. So this comp.name.split, and then in quotes, we put a pipe in here. And what that does, let's see if I can move up over here. What that's basically saying is we have a split wherever there is a pipe inside of the name of the composition. So now, if I come over here, I'll just use mine for an example. The name of this is Christopher Waddell, Winter Caretaker 2. But I can come over here and say Motion Guy. And it will only change just that over there, because we have these 2 lines of text. And so what I did was I used a little pipe as the separator, and then this one gets a 0, this one gets a 1. It's After Effects counts from 0 instead of from 1. So I basically have to say, what this is saying is that use anything before the pipe in the name here, and use anything after the pipe in the name here. And so what we end up is just a really quick way to just, rapidly change some text. So that's that. Great. So now I want to talk a little bit about the essential graphics rig that I created. So I talked a little bit about this earlier. There's this great little panel over here called the Essential Graphics panel. And what this allows us to do is, like I said, we can go in and take a whole bunch of properties from a whole bunch of different layers and just drag them straight into here and kind of make a little, a condensed list of all of the properties that we want to mess with here. So what I did with this template was I created a few different things. We have we have this, which is our source text over here. And then we just have a series of other layers that kind of support all the lower thirds on the bottom. So I can go in here and I have, all the lines of text, and I can change these to whatever I want on the fly. And, that will then change the title. But I also played around with some other little things. I have these little sliders over here, and I can take these and change the text position. So say we want it to be on the left, or the center, or the right. We can go ahead and manipulate that to our heart's content. And also how many lines. It's not, especially if you've ever worked for me, a medical association and a school, people will make their titles as long as humanly possible. So it's good to kind of have a little bit of flexibility in that. So I've made a slider here that kind of takes the amount of text lines and expands it. And you'll notice that as it is adding a new line, it is also pulling the text up. And we have some other things, like we can, change the color of the text, and we can also add a little gradient there if we want to. So what's actually happening over here? I kind of want to take a second to go through that. And what's up with all of this Comic Sans that we have in the corner here. So essentially what I did was I created 3 different sets of this text. So we have the left set over here, the center set over here, and the right set over here. These are all essentially the exact same thing. It's just the only thing that has changed is just position and alignment. And what that allows me to do is basically take something like this text position slider right over here, and I'm basically messing with the visibility. That's really all that's happening here. I'm saying, effectively, if the slider is at the first position, then only make this visible. If the slider is at this position, then only make this visible, and so on and so forth. Let's take a look at that example right here. And that's kind of exactly what I'm doing here, is basically like this opacity right here, I have added an expression to. So this expression is going to supersede any value that was written inside of here, and it's also going to supersede any keyframe that was added as well. And so effectively, I'm basically just saying if this checkbox over here, this all represents the checkbox that I'm talking about, or the slider. If this slider is set to 1, then make the visibility of this 100%, or else don't. So it's a pretty simple, just 2-step kind of expression there. And what that allows us to do is that. And I basically applied that exact same thinking to the text lines. So if the slider is in one position, then make these visible. If the slider is in another, then don't. Is really all that's doing. So we're able to make now a very quick and dirty lower third that anyone can just kind of take and use really quick. The reason why we have all of this over here, this extra text, this Comic Sans over here, I kind of, whenever I put something in that's not really supposed to be there or is never supposed to be seen, I try to make it as ugly as possible so that people know that probably shouldn't be like that. But effectively, all these are just the actual container text. These are the text here is going to dictate whatever text is on the bottom over here, and we just basically link that property across. So I can go into say my let's pull this up over here. Inside of all of my text, I have an expression on the actual source text here. And what this effectively says is look at this layer up top, this Comic Sans layer over here, and just do exactly what that is doing. So that's how I'm kind of getting one piece of text here to influence all 3 of these other ones. So yeah, Now we have basically just have like a couple of sliders that do lots of things all at once. This is a great example of something that is actually easier to use than giving people like just a simple text template, or having to create these things yourself every time anyone asks for a lower third. Like now you can just take this thing, give it to your editor. Your editor doesn't have to ask you for this lower third. They don't have to ask, they don't have to iterate on it or anything. Oh, well, we have a different colored background. Can I have a black version of this instead? They can just do that themselves now. This is saving you a ton of time, and it's only gaining them like maybe a little bit. And there's a lot less waiting around. So this is one example of something that actually works across, both editors and motion design people really well. So I'm going to go ahead and turn these layers off because we don't actually need those. Now, this is all fine and good for an After Effects motion design person, but say I want to take this now and give it to my editor. What do? Rather than giving them the whole After Effects file like we used to do, it used to be we would just like get a bunch of properties and specify that these properties are going to be or these text layers can be editable for Premiere. Dynamic linking, I think it was called. I tried not to use it as much as possible. But what we have now is this export motion graphics template. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And I'm going to save that to our local drive. And this creates a little file over here called a MOGRT. I'm not sure if Adobe prefers. We call them MOGRTs. I think there's a motion graphics template I think is preferred, but all I see is like, remember that yogurt in a tube from the 90s?
Yogurt.
Yeah, that's the one. So that's kind of all I see whenever I see the dot and MOGRT extension. So I'm just going to pop open Premiere really quick and just kind of show you how this works in action in Premiere. There's going to be zero surprises. It's going to look exactly like what I showed you in After Effects. So we'll just go ahead and create a new project. Sure. So now, when your editor gets this thing, all they have to do is just go into their Essential Graphics panel inside of Premiere. So we're going to click on that, and it shows up on the side over here. And probably should have put this in beforehand, but that wouldn't be a full explanation here. So I'm going to sorry about that. Give me 1 second.
Can you undock that panel just to see if you're missing anything?
Yeah, I feel like I might be.
Just undock.
Yeah. Oh, you know what? That's the problem. There we go. I thought I was going crazy for a second. No, it was the bottom part of the app was just exceeding the screen. Great. So there's this little plus button over here. I'm going to hit that. I'm going to add this this MOGRT file over here. And the cool thing about motion graphics templates inside of Premiere is that they always live in Premiere no matter what project you have. They're not just like going inside of your bin over here. So this thing, for something like this, like a lower third that we use for every one of our videos, like this is something that will be just, constant in your, in your editor's collection. So it's right over here. Let's go ahead and Create a new sequence, sure. And we're gonna toss that right in there. Hey, search actually worked this time. So then it does its usual pinwheel of death for a little bit. And there we go. I'm going to go ahead and make Essential Graphics tiny. And great. So now we have that, the thing that we just made inside of After Effects, sitting inside of Premiere. So, you know, your pretty typical lower third situation. But the cool thing is now, if I go into the Edit tab and click on this, all of those properties that I had laid out inside of After Effects are available to the Premiere editor. So now I can just give them one file and they can very simply just go in and, you know, say exactly what they want in there. And then it's just done and ready to ship. And then maybe they put a video in there and realize that like it, you know, isn't quite working out. They can flip the text between black and white. They can add the gradient, you know. They can do all of this without having to come back and say, oh, hey, this isn't looking very visible. Can we please change this property or you know, do something crazy with this? I've just given them all the tools that they need to make this thing visible in most situations, and also kept things restricted enough so they can't mess with it too much beyond what the brand dictates. I don't, how much time do we have left?
You can have as much time as you like. Are you looking to, would you like more or less time?
Yeah, I think, you know, whatever. I want to keep it. I want to keep it the half hour for, you know, respect of everyone's time. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a boring little lower third. I want to kind of just, I kind of brought this as more of like an extra thing that maybe I show off, maybe I won't. But, you know, why not? So one thing that I did for a video recently, people needed these little weird ball, sort of spidery looking people for a thing we were doing. We were basically doing a video series on diversity and inclusivity, and one of the things we didn't want to do was use humans at all. We wanted to kind of try and represent, represent different groups with, kind of more like abstract things, just like these little smiley face balls. So one of the things I wanted to do was I still wanted to give them lots of personality. So they have a lot of those kind of like human traits without making them like necessarily humans. So we don't have to specifically call out, a group of people or a gender or a race or anything. So we kind of went with these little ball people over here. And just kind of give you a quick little example of the rig that we put together for that. It's just a real simple little thing like this. I kind of made a little example. It's got some nice little stretch and squash, and they can kind of move around wherever, and they can, change their expression, and they can blink, and they can move their eyes and everything. So what we did was we pulled this into a character rig. And I heard some people in the back talking about Duick earlier, and you can get really crazy, massively crazy with your character rigs. But I kind of, for the purposes of this, I wanted to kind of make something really, nice and plain and simple to kind of show off how, just how many properties you can kind of link together to make these sorts of things work. So I'm going to bring back my Essential Graphics panel, and I'm going to switch over to. What am I calling this thing? 2.2? So this is the graphics rig that we used for this series. And we have a few different things over here. So we have our arm, and our arms actually take up a ton. Like this, it's all of these layers. And we're using a tool called Rubber Hose to make that happen. Which will basically just create a line, and then you can take 2 points of that line and kind of move them however, but it will also like stretch and squash and bend. And this is a great way to make like noodle arms if you want to do like Adventure Time kind of stuff. So that's kind of what we did, was just giving this little sphere person some little noodle arms just to kind of hang from the side. And then we kind of really wanted to focus on, changing the expressions of this character and manipulating their face. In very similar style to what we did for the lower third, we have a couple of things over here. First, we have the head color. So if we want, we can change it to various different Google colors. I think we kept the arms blue for some reason, but I forget what the reason was for that. So you can go ahead and change these to various different colors just on a whim. You can change the detail. So this is another thing, basically the same thing we did with that lower third, where we are taking certain elements, the little gleam in their eyes and the teeth and the tongue, and we're just very simply saying, if this checkbox is on, turn them on. If the checkbox is off, turn them off. So when we were going through kind of the phase of trying to figure out what the design of this was going to be, I wanted to give people the option to turn off the detail if they thought this was a bit much. This also looks a bit hollow and weird, so I think we ended up going with this. But we also have the head scale, which is, in effect, just basically taking the head and making it bigger. That's a little bit of an exaggeration, but you see that's kind of how we got that stretch and squash when he was moving back and forth. And then we also have face position, and this is the one that I really, really enjoy playing with. The face position, you see when we take this, and it's gonna fight me. When we take this head position and start to move it, you see that, let me, sorry about this. I want to kind of show how this is actually being affected. So yeah, great. I'm going to make a couple of keyframes here to kind of show this off. So let's kind of have him looking up a little bit. Or down, I guess. That's fine. So you see what we have here now is when the head moves, the mouth is just a little tiny bit offset from the eyes. So like that's kind of all a part of the rig. What we basically do is when we move this face position over here around, we tell the eyes to move at a certain rate, and then through another expression we can tell the mouth to move at another rate. And what we also have are these arms over here. The arms are actually moving in the opposite direction of the rest of the face. And they're also, I think this is probably a good example right here. The arms are moving in a different direction as the face, and they're also kind of, you see how they're going in front of the head when they need to be. So a lot of that is just kind of done with a basic expression to, kind of make things, to have things appear either in front or behind something, in addition to kind of moving, with or against this rotation over here. So we also have that. We have the mouth shape, where you can come in and you can basically change that mouth to make whatever you want. So you can have it, you can have the character actually speak. If you want to kind of have these, it has all the shapes that you would need to have a character, make a full conversation. So that was kind of fun to play around with. And the way we actually animated this, let me go back over to, this is kind of another cool little feature of the Essential Graphics panel, is anything that you put in the Essential Graphics panel, you can go into, you can bring into another composition. So right now we have these sitting here as a nested comp. If you open up there's a new little thing over here. See if you can see it here. Whenever you nest a comp that already has something in the Essential Graphics panel, you have this little thing called Master Properties now. And this is what allowed us then to go through and keyframe all of these little properties here to make all that movement and that stretch and squash and make the character smile as it moves across the screen. That was all keyframed out here on top of this pre-comp rather than inside of the comp itself. And that frees up like a ton of time now. You don't have to go back and forth. You don't have to go inside inside that pre-comp every time you want to change a little tiny thing and then back out. You can just kind of throw all your keyframes in a line right over here, and it will manipulate all the properties that are inside of this inside of this thing. So that saved us a ton of time, because like in this video, I think we used about 20 of these at a time on screen, all interacting with one another. So we needed to kind of have something that would allow us to very rapidly make these things move. So yeah, I think, and we're doing Q&A later, right? Yeah. Okay, great. So those are kind of all the little things I wanted to show off. So thanks for listening, or